on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review, and this is our pseudo-weekly show where we review the Magic stories. And this week, while we will be back for the Planeswalker's Guide next week, this week we are here for the final Streets of New Capenna story in general, with side story 5 of 5. They're not technically numbered, but there are 5 of them. And this is the 5th and final, Alley Cat Blues by Rhiannon Rasmussen. My quick review at the top is, while not impactful to the canon story itself, I still really enjoyed this one. I thought Rhiannon's writing was phenomenal. Yeah. And we both thought that, of course. But I highly recommend it. I think it's worth your time. Yeah. Big time.
I would agree. I think, yeah, we'll get to the writing. Yeah. It was good.
So, if you have not had a chance to read this story for yourself and that got you interested in doing so, the top link the top link in the description down below will take you to the story so you can read it for yourself. We remove as many barriers as possible. Just read the story. It's good. We're not sponsored in any way. We liked it, and so you should read it. And then, of course, if you're going to leave here to go read it, we would love it if you would come back here and join us after that so that we can keep the conversation going and you can give us your opinions on how you feel about it.
As always.
Yes, exactly. That's what the comment section of these videos in particular is really for. We really want to hear from you.
Yeah.
Before we get onto the full review itself, hi, welcome to the channel. Thank you for being here. Please don't forget, here on YouTube, while you are on any of our channels, because we have other channels linked down in the description box below, don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so that you will get notifications whenever any of our videos come out. Subscribing here on YouTube, just as a reminder, fully free. It's not Twitch, and that's not a knock on Twitch, it's just a reminder for folks. You don't have to pay anything to subscribe. That's just how it works. Also, I mentioned our other channels, you can check those out. We have 3 videos a week coming out over on Video Games for All, and 1 video a month over on Gluten Free for All, which, Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, you're always open to suggestions or thoughts.
Yes, please, reach out to us on streams, or kind of social media, kind of any way that you're able to or would like to.
Exactly.
To leave suggestions for me of what you'd like to see on Gluten Free for All.
As always, no promises. If you suggest something, we're not automatically going to do it, but it gives us ideas.
I can try.
Exactly. It gives us ideas for things in the future, and especially if we know that that's something that people want, it helps us to know that it's something that we should probably do. So, and then, as Amy mentioned...
And plus, it's fun to talk about it in chat when we're streaming and stuff like that.
Agreed.
This is what, and like work the whole thing out.
That's right.
So...
Exactly. So, and as Amy properly now has mentioned twice, thank you for the segues, we stream twice a week here on this channel, Mondays and Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern, so you should definitely check that out if you're fans of Magic the Gathering, because you're here. We stream MTG Arena every Monday at 8 p.m. Almost always we are doing limited, draft, sealed, whatever the most recent version of that is, that format. And like I said, almost always we're doing that. And then on Fridays we're doing whatever random video game we happen to be doing at the time. This Friday we will be continuing our playthrough of Pokemon Fire Red, but we are nuzlocking it. If you missed last week, you can check the VOD over on Video Games for All. Like I said, link in the description below. We may or may not have lost our first team member, so that's a thing. But we also beat our first gym leader, so that's also a thing. So definitely check that out. Like I said, link to Video Games for All in the description below. And then, of course, we would love it if you would join us here on Friday at 8 p.m. for the continuation of that playthrough. We've been having an amazing time in chat on all of our streams, really, with an amazing group of folks, and we would love to have you there as well.
Yeah, it's a warm, fun community.
Exactly. Tons of fun. So, yeah, with that all out of the way, thank you for allowing us to do that and giving us that moment. Any and all support really does help out a lot. Don't forget, likes and shares go a very long way on any of these as well.
Right.
But, on to the full review itself. We are here to discuss, it's a side story, so we're here to focus on one main character, as we have been doing for basically all of these side stories, in Kit Kanto, who... I mean, we've seen her in the main stories, just kind of around. She was not really consequential in any capacity. She just kind of existed in their presence, and they discussed her, referenced the fact that she was there occasionally. But she was among the cabaret. anytime that we saw her, and she was kind of this, I don't know, like cocky figure, it seemed, of like knowledgeable of her own ability, and everybody knew how good she was, and so that's just how we saw her.
Right.
Here, this is kind of before that.
Right.
She still was.
She got her start.
Yes, I would say argue that she was still confident of her abilities, but just was not with the cabaretti and prim and proper and etc. So, I loved how it started where she mentioned that she was a subway busker crooning for change, which, if you've ever been to the subways of New York City, look, some of those people are extremely talented.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I have been that typical New Yorker where I'm like, nope, just trying to get to work, gotta go. Like, so I apologize, I suppose, to those folks, but very, very talented. And again, she even mentions, like, trying to find the most acoustic area to be in.
Right.
Because that sound travels down there. It's extremely cavernous, and you're just going to be in a spot and you're going to hear that music for like hundreds and hundreds of feet, around corners, upstairs, downstairs, and you're just like, where the hell is it coming from even? But yeah, so those people do a very good job, and sometimes, right, I have no inside baseball knowledge of like amounts or anything, but sometimes those people can do quite well.
Good.
If
I
you,
hope they do.
Yeah, especially if it's like a busy like tourist weekend or whatever.
Right.
You have people like stopping, watching the performance, and then they may feel compelled to drop some coin, drop some cash, whatever. So yeah, definitely. And then yes, we wanted to talk about the writing style. I have that written next because that's where the descriptions really, I think, started to really ramp up, and where we both kind of looked at each other and were like, oh my god, this is like really good.
Yeah, there was a point where it seemed to get to like an area where it was like a lot of just over the top almost vocabulary.
Okay.
That I didn't love.
Interesting.
I think that's a barrier of entry.
Interesting. Sure. Okay.
But, you know, and I think that that's a little bit show-offy for the writer to do.
Interesting.
Like, whoever your audience is who you should be speaking to, and I feel like that's not your demographic here. But, that being said, I think the descriptions were incredible.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. I wrote the descriptions and the metaphorical language that was used, like some of the comparisons are just, I never heard anything like it before, and yet it made perfect sense, which is what you want out of metaphors, right? If it's a metaphor you've heard a million times, you're like, ugh, okay, cool. You know, glistened like the sun, like, all right, thanks, you know, but like, just some of the language, like I said, some of the language that was used, absolutely incredible. I fully agree.
Okay.
I actually wanted to go back to that first point you made. Very interesting. I don't know that I wholly agree, but I don't think it's a bad point to make, and I would love other people's thoughts as well. I think, for me personally, right, when there is, like, new vocabulary used or flowery language or $5 words or whatever you want to call it, right, if there's a couple, that I think is good because it gives you the opportunity to be like, oh, what's that? And you look it up. But yes, I guess if it's like every other line or every one in a paragraph.
It was just like an odd section that just had a lot of that. And then it kind of moved back away from it.
And
it just felt out of place and not appropriate.
It makes me feel kind of like a jerk because I didn't really notice it. So I'm sitting here. But I mean, I have been very fortunate in my life to be very educated, right? So like, I completely understand how folks who may not have had the opportunities or et cetera to be exposed to that degree of vocabulary and et cetera, where, like you said, it's a barrier of entry where if it's, like you said, there's one big section of it, you're not going to stop every line and like let me look up this word, let me look up this word. You're just going to be like, oh, okay, I'm done now. And I fully get that. Because there have been times where I'll be reading through something and I'll be like, I don't know what that means and I just don't care. Right? You just like keep going. And if that makes it so that you can't understand the story, then you kind of just have to be like, okay, well, I guess I'm done then. This isn't really for me. Or you just go through the story having missed like that key point or that key plot section and being more and more confused as you go throughout, so that by the time you're done, you're like, I didn't really like that. It didn't make sense. And it's like, it didn't make sense because you didn't understand the language, because it's a barrier of entry. So I guess I can understand, like I said, I can understand where you're coming from. For me, I didn't feel that way, but that doesn't mean that your point isn't valid.
For this particular story, I don't think it affected it that much, where it was like, oh, I'm just gonna mentally check out now.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, I almost want to say like what they said in that section wasn't that imperative. And maybe that's what they did, why they did it like that. Maybe they were like compensating for the fact that what was said there maybe didn't have, they felt like they didn't have that much to say with what they were saying for that paragraph or whatever.
Okay.
And so they just like made it really flowery. I don't know, but you know, especially for a game for people who are 13 and up, or for a story where you're talking to, you know, people who are performing in subways for money. I mean, this is a story that can represent them in a way that stories usually don't, right?
Okay.
And to kind of expect them to keep on reading when there's a whole paragraph of just like random words that kind of don't seem to have a ton of meaning, and the meaning that they do have, you need to look them up to find out.
Okay.
It kind of just seems shitty to me.
I have
not even elitist, like actual pretension.
Okay. I have a like a tangentially related point to make at the end that I wrote at the end, so maybe we'll come back to talking about that. I don't see it as that severe, but I absolutely see your points that you're making, and as always, we would love to hear other folks' thoughts as well. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Why not? Anything and everything, we would love to hear from you. So, I guess, because we haven't really talked about it, this story is about Kit being found in the subway, like discovered, I should say, in the subway by Jetmir, the leader of the Cabaretti, who owns a nightclub type, situation, and so, has a stage for her to perform on.
Doesn't take the subway.
But he does, that's so weird, right? But I guess, how else do you get around except, maybe you have your own personal car, right?
Yeah.
And your own driver and everything.
Fucking Jetmir.
Yeah, that's a fair point. But he was there, and he walked up to her.
He was looking for somebody to prey upon.
I guess, yeah, because she said maybe it was because he didn't want to, lose or risk one of his lieutenants. Mm-hmm. But anyway, to give context for those statements, she was found by Jetmir, given a card, and said, you know what, tonight you're coming to the Ventaleon, and you're going to perform. And she's like, okay, because again,
right.
you get asked by Jetmir to perform at the Ventaleon, and you say yes, right? That's not a maybe or a no thank you or whatever.
Or let me check my calendar.
Yeah, exactly. You make time in that calendar by canceling literally anything else. But he says you can do that, but you got to do something for me first. And that
I was like, of course.
And that job is picking up a parcel or a bag. With what turns out to be a bunch of Halo in it, stolen Halo, and delivering it to Park Heights. And she has to do so on the third string train, like the third class train.
Yeah, they specifically mentioned it was third class.
Multiple
times. And I appreciate that they did that. I don't know if that was still really a thing come the 20s and 30s in a place like New York.
Right.
But that absolutely was a thing back before then, when, earlier on, probably early turn of the century, it was still probably pretty heavily a thing.
Yeah.
So, I think that it matters a lot that they mentioned that several times.
Yeah, and then
to kind of give us context as to more who she is, but also just the state of how things are there.
Yes. And I've always said, right, we're doing the Planeswalker's Guide next week, but at the time that you would be reading this story, the Planeswalker's Guide hadn't come out yet when this story was first released. These side stories, I feel, always do a much better job of giving you an idea of the structure of the plane, the structure, in this case, of the city. Like, you get to hear about the fact that there's a third string train, a second string train, it's first class, sorry. But third class, second class, first class. And that she says, if she gets to become a member of the family of the Cabaretti, that she might be able to start taking that second class rail from then on.
Right.
Or, God forbid, that the big upper members get to take that first class line. And that maybe someday she could get there or whatever, but it does a very good job of actually stating that to you. Why would we have ever known that before now?
Right.
We wouldn't. There would have been no context for it whatsoever. In fact, I don't know that even before today they mentioned that the subway exists.
Right.
Like, it makes sense and you just kind of assume it if you're aware of the structure of New York City then and obviously now. But if it wasn't specifically told to us in some capacity, you don't know that that's a thing.
Right. This is the world of magic with that theme sort of packed in.
Yeah.
Right? So there are pieces of that theme that just don't get packed in, and pieces that do. And so it's nice for them to say, this exists in this world, when you don't necessarily assume that it does.
And before folks say, Joe, there's the tram station card and there's the full art planes with the... Yes, but those are above ground, right? If we're actually talking about subway, then not the weird, bad restaurant chain. If we're talking about the subway stations, that's different, right? Because that's underground. I don't, to my knowledge, know if we've seen that on a card art, but at least the ones on like the full art planes that I'm thinking of or whatever, that's above ground. That's a train station, but above ground. So that would be like the first class train station, probably. Which, interesting, if that's what Elspeth was riding, how did she get onto the first class train? Right, because we saw her coming on a train. Maybe it was third class, and that's just still where the train ends up. I'm not sure.
Well, if you can afford and look as though you belong on the second class train, then she could take it to the second class train.
Sure, but how did she get money? She hadn't even started her odd jobs yet. The first time we see her is the first time she's on the plane, and she just kind of shows up in that station having no idea what to do. So like, she wouldn't have been able to have any money unless a Johnny gave her money that they didn't show us in the language or whatever, which I doubt.
Yeah, me
anyway, whatever. It's yada yada, right? It doesn't really matter, but I'm still curious.
But it's an interesting point, because I like the fact that they make these references and like you said, show what the plane is actually like. Because when we're just seeing from the point of view of being in one of these crime families, we're only seeing from the point of view of the first class people of this nation, basically.
Very good point.
And finally, we're seeing not only that there's first class and sort of coach, if you will. There's first class, second class, and third class.
Yep.
So there's an actual caste system that exists in this world. And it's really important that we know that and what that means for the people who live here. Because, you know, if we're seeing these crime families with their petty fighting over, you know, alcohol, basically, or drugs, or whatever you want to say the Halo
However
is.
Halo works.
But, you know, it's referencing the prohibition, so I'll say alcohol. You're not getting to see what these people who have no access to Halo at all, what their lives are like. And they mentioned, like, these lollipops that are, like, Halo infused.
Yeah.
Like, being available to, like, the lower class. And, like, that's all... That basically, that's how... The only way, I assume, that they actually get Halo.
Right.
And I assume that that's either, like, fake or such a minimal amount that it probably doesn't do that much. You know, I think they said that they use it for like teething babies or whatever, or no, starving babies.
Yes, to give their babies a little bit to satiate the hunger.
To soothe them.
Yep.
So, again, talking about the fact that they're starving is a massive way to sort of gain the perspective of what it's like to actually live in New Capenna. You've got these people who are, if you want to compare it to nowadays, the 1%, right? And you've got a second class, or comparing it to nowadays, what you would consider a working class. And then you've got third class, which is, you know, people who are unable to feed their families to the point where they have to soothe their babies with alcohol to get them to stop crying from hunger pains. So it's important to have that spectrum shown to us.
Yeah. You can go right into that point if you want, by the way. That is the next thing there.
Oh.
This thing.
Oh, yes. So it's kind of a good segue into our next point, which is that Kit, in a certain spot,
when Agnes is basically threatening her on the train, Agnes, the Viashino riveteer, shows up on the train, says there's a woman on here who, a Lenin woman who was given a bag of our stuff,
right,
and we want it back, and we're gonna find her, and we're gonna, you know, we're gonna take care of her.
Right, right. We're gonna make her sleep with the fishes. No. But yeah, I mean, that's where we learn that this mindset that she lives in, this scarcity mindset that I've referenced in other episodes of JaAR, her Maslow's hierarchy of needs aren't being met. And so she's putting her career needs in front of her life. She's not even letting her life matter more than the possibility of being able to establish herself and make money, because that's how desperately she needs it.
Yep.
And that's huge. That's huge for us to know.
It's telling, yeah.
Yeah, it's telling.
Very telling.
It's telling how much these, like, savior sort of crime families that kind of, like, established New Capenna are actually harming New Capenna and all of its citizens.
Yeah. Yeah, that, absolutely. I to give a little bit of levity to follow up from that, I will say I really loved the line when Kit actually escapes the train and tries to start running away. First of all, they comment on the fact, I mean, I don't know how many vials she had of this halo, nor do we have any concept, at least nor do I have any concept in my mind, of what this halo is actually worth.
Right.
The riveteers were literally taking the entire train apart. What? For how many vials of halo? It couldn't have been that many. There was in the folds of her jacket. And it was in a messenger bag. They're taking apart an entire train to get at it. Yeah. That's insane to me.
I think that was like two halves of a whole there. I think that was like partly they're the riveteers, so like building and taking apart is like what they know how to do.
Build and destroy is their thing, yeah.
And then the other half is like, look how big of a deal this shit is.
I guess.
You know, like when drug dealers get their drugs stolen out from under them, they murder people.
Yeah.
That's what they do.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to like establish, you know, an urgency here that these people are saying, this stuff is ours, give it back. We don't care about destroying whatever we have to destroy to get it.
I'll be vague here because I don't know the full details. I wasn't there, so this is being told from a third-party perspective. But My mother tells a story that when she was younger, because for those who are new, my family grew up in New York City in the 50s and 60s and whatever, and were pseudo-riveteer type folks in helping to build the World Trade Center towers, the Empire State Building, other prominent buildings in New York City. But my mother tells a story that when she was younger, she is in her home at night with her family and hears bang, boom, 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 boom. Don't know what it is. Come to find out, genuinely a mob hit on her street that night that she could just hear out her window.
Yeah.
Her father knew the guy. They walked the dogs together, apparently. So it's a thing. It definitely happened, and it happened to real people.
Right.
And so,
it's not an abstract idea that you can be, separate from it and say, well, it's a thing that they make fun of in movies, but,
it didn't actually happen, right?
We all have that actual connection to those people who were just killed.
Yeah. Yep. And it you just hear it on the street and then you're like, okay, I guess it's time to go to bed. Like, what else do you do, right?
Right. You can't say, well, I've got to leave. I've got to drive out of this town that I live in and never come back. You don't get to do that if that's where you live.
Yeah.
So.
So anyway, that was a hell of a thing, and always an interesting story to me because I didn't have to actually be around for that. I was, definitely not alive because my mom was younger than I am now when that occurred. But yeah, very interesting. But sorry, I was trying to bring some levity. I said when they're taking the train apart and Kit runs away and Agnes finds Kit and says something to her, some like snarky line of like, give it up, kid, or something like that. Kit kind of says to herself, buskers knew when to ignore catcalls. Which
I loved that one.
I also loved that one. First of all, she's a cat. Right. So catcalls, fantastic, love it, great. Also, that's just true. Right. That's just a true statement. And third, that the cat call was coming from a riveteer, aka a construction worker.
Right. And she's a female.
It's just like...
So... yeah.
Very, very good. Well done there.
Yeah. It hit a lot of cliches, like, all at the same time, without being, like, too nail on the head. So I liked it a lot, too.
So let's contrast it. I had written this down later on, but let me see if I can find it quickly enough. If not, I'll just yada yada it. Oh yeah, here it is. What about later on when Kit says, "Oh well, no use crying over spilt milk"?
Right.
Was that?
He's a cat.
Exactly. I also liked that one. I didn't think it was too over the top, but maybe.
Yeah, I didn't care for that one too much because me, I have higher standards than that. But you love the like baseline low standard kind of pun.
Look, low hanging fruit is like where I live comedy wise. That's I'm totally okay with that.
The dad jokes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's not an insult. It's cute. It's just
I don't take it as
an
an
insult. I just don't find it funny.
It's fine. I don't take it as an insult at all. Then we get the moment where Kit is being pursued. She's carrying this bag, but we knew from way early on that she had already removed the vials of Halo from the bag. The only thing that she had kept in the bag was the gown that she was going to be wearing for her big premiere, right? And that she was like holding that bag tight. It had already been elbowed by the devil, or whatever, the devil person. And so while she's being pursued by Agnes and one or more of the other riveteers as well, she just is at the edge. She knows she can't jump off because she'll die, right? Cats always land on their feet, but this would not have worked for her. And so she holds the bag out over the edge.
She knows it's not a 9 lives thing. It's a 1 life thing.
That's right. So she holds the bag out over the edge and lets it go. And then uses that distraction opportunity to run up, like scale up this thing. At that point, I guess she figures, and so do the riveteers, that it's irrelevant for her. Like, to continue pursuing her, they have to go down where this bag went. They have to climb down carefully, not jump down.
Right.
And find this bag to get the halo and see if any of the vials survived. Well, there weren't any in there, so irrelevant, but still. But I liked that, contrasting what you were talking about before, she actually put her life over her career. She dropped the bag that had the gown in it. She may have felt, I mean, she fixed it later, spoilers, but she may have felt that she needed that gown to present herself in the best light possible to get this job, to get this gig, if you will. And yet she chose to go the other direction with it and ditch the thing, which shows good personal character growth.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're in that kind of a situation, you don't really have a choice, right? It's, you know, you can't care about this gown that you're going to perform in later if you're too dead to perform.
It's true.
So,
very true.
But, you know, but she had to get to that point where it was literally a life or death situation, and she had no other choice in order for her to actually choose her life over her career.
And also,
because of how desperately she needed money.
Yeah.
And how sickening it is in this plane that she can't be taken care of enough to be in a situation where she doesn't have to put her career above her life.
But also, I find it interesting because the story played it off as this like ha-ha thing, but like everybody that she came across after that point who was on her side, Henzi, the woman in the red dress, both of them were just like, oh, we didn't think you'd make it. She could have died. Like, actually died.
But again, the halo is more important than people's lives.
Yeah. Like, it was just, yeah,
It's really sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, you know, and I wish I could say that it's a pathetic thing that I don't know anything about, but we do know things about it because it's the reality of the world in present day as well.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, drug dealers lose their drugs because of somebody, that somebody gets killed.
Yeah.
The end.
Yep. I thought it was interesting. She does obviously live and make it to the venue on time. On time. She has 6 minutes before showtime.
Right.
And then she's told by the woman who's taking her to the dressing room or whatever that she has 6 minutes until the show starts, 2 minutes of introductions, and then she's on. So she's got like 6 to 8 minutes to get ready to sing, to perform. I would not have been able to do that. In any of the performances and stuff that we did, like, I personally wanted to, like, have a ton of prep time to, like, relax and be able to change into my costume and, like, make sure that I was good to go, my hair, etc. Like,
oh, to me it wouldn't matter because I would get on the stage and freeze regardless of how much prep time I had. So there you go.
Oh my god. I just can't, like, that. Reading that, I was just like, so you're screwed, right? Like, you get there and there's 6 minutes to go, you're gonna get on that stage, you're gonna be like, you know, like, you're just like so out of breath, like you can't, I don't know how the hell that works.
Yeah.
Even like filming these videos sometimes, like, I'm just like, if I'm like running around frantically beforehand, I still need to give myself, like, okay, let's take a minute, let me be ready, like, you know, before a stream or something like that, it's like, okay, let me sit down and just center myself for just a moment before we get, it's not just like, sit down, press play, here we go, let's get started. Like,
I never have enough time before a stream to do that. Because I'm always by the skin of my teeth. Always.
It's just, I just can't do it. So props again, or more so, to Kit at that point for that, because I can't do it.
And she's pretty incredible with all the things that she was able to do prior to that point as well.
Agreed. Oh, that was the other point I wanted to make. When she left that train, she is jumping, she's rolling, she's diving, she's falling, and none of those Halo vials broke.
Yeah, right.
None of them in her coat. And they even talk about the fact that afterwards the hem of her coat is ripped. It wouldn't have been ripped after, like, as she was pulling the halo out,
right,
or when she was on the first class or second class train back or whatever.
And they specifically said that she counted them in front of
one. Yes, cockily doing so.
Right.
Henzi was his name.
But yeah, I would not have trusted that even my luck, and I have good luck, even my luck I would not have trusted that all the vials would still be there by the time I got there.
And yet they all were, somehow. Again, there's no way.
For the story.
Exactly. Yeah. She had plot armor around them. It was great. So, okay, then we get to the actual performance itself. She makes herself look good enough and gets out onto the stage, does her performance. They had talked...
Slightly presentable.
Yeah, they had talked about her set leading up to it, like what she would do and etc. We'll talk about that at the end. But it was not suspenseful to me whether or not she was going to get into the cabaret or not. Because we know she already is. We've read the stories where she is. And so they did a good job of, I think, not making you think, oh my God, is she going to make it? Is she not going to make it? You know she makes it.
They didn't dwell on that.
Correct. But what I did enjoy was that they allowed that performance to not be a will she, won't she, but more of a, oh look, Agnes is in the crowd. Well, let's go ahead and make this performance a big F you to her, because now I get to see her face. I get to look her in the face as I sing about how I screwed her over.
Right.
And change some of the lyrics of the songs to talk about how I screwed her over.
Right.
And presumably also impress Jetmir and impress the woman in the red gown or whatever. Like,
right.
You know, more things to improve her career. They're inside jokes to the people that are at the show, so like they don't understand, but still, it worked for her, and so why not do it, right? But
like she said in the story, she said, you know, I'm going to show them what I'm made of. And, you know, they thought that I wasn't going to survive this interaction and actually make it to the show. Well, I'm going to show them. And so not only did she make it to the show, she didn't have her gown, but she was able to, you know, still make it onto the stage having been through what she had been through and not having her gown.
Yeah.
And then she was able to sing well and rub it in Agnes's face.
Yeah.
That she was able to have, you know, that she was able to make the transaction happen regardless of what Agnes, you know, wanted to do about it.
And as you referenced earlier, right, Henzi first said, you know, I didn't think you'd make it, or I'm surprised you made it, or whatever. The woman in the red gown said she and Jetmir had a bet going as to whether or not she would make it. So again, compounding on top of the fact that this young woman's life was on the line, and yet, as you correctly put it, the 1%ers were betting on it instead.
Right.
And again, if you're thinking that that's too far-fetched, go look up that Purdue story relating to COVID, when the heads of the Purdue plants or whatever, if it wasn't Purdue, then I apologize, but a factory plant where people had to come in, and there was evidence of the fact that the heads of the plant were like, oh, let's bet and see how many people or how long it takes them all to get COVID.
Right.
It literally happens, like, now. Right now.
Right. All the time.
Yep. So, not that far-fetched of a fantasy story we've got going on here, unfortunately.
And that's what I liked about this.
Oh, yeah,
it was
absolutely.
Real.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah, that's not a negative by any means. In fact, I appreciate, and we try to call it out as much as we can, when these stories parallel real life like that. Mm-hmm. Because, yes, it's an escape, yes, it's entertainment, but it's also real life. Like, these people you're supposed to think that these people live in like reality. You're supposed to be able to feel for these people and care. I mean, you should care about the fact that Kit wants this job. It's what she wants to do and feels like she can do, and etc. It's important.
And that she needs it that badly that she's willing to risk her own life and possibly the life of other people as well, to get it.
Yeah. Now, you talked about this a bit before, and I said we'd come back to it. This is the final point that I had to make. So if there are other things that you wanted to talk about, let me know. But I didn't think so either. But I still feel like there was something missing in this story. And I'll tell you what. Why. This is a written medium, right? And we've talked about this many times, that a written medium versus a visual medium or an auditory medium leaves things out versus gives you things to work with. And I think that this particular story did not do a good job of being, excuse me, of being a text medium or a written medium as opposed to an auditory one. Because I truly feel like there were things, I hate it when songs are in books that are not known songs. What's the tune? How am I supposed to know what that song sounds like? I can't make it up in my head because where's the timbre? Where's the lines? How does it work? I do not like it at all. And in this story, I don't think that it fixed that in any way for me personally. There were songs written in here. I don't know what they sound like. They're made up songs that exist on Capenna. So how the hell do I know? Like, they tell it, oh, it's a love song. Okay. Does that mean that I know what it's supposed to sound like? That I just take a love ballad that I've heard before and put that tune underneath it? I have no concept of what that song sounds like. So how would I do that? That I don't like. Plus, it even got compounded more, in my opinion, because of the fact that with Agnes's and Kit's accents here, if you want to call it that, or method of speaking. Agnes and Kit, a couple of times in the story, not even a lot of times, but a couple of times in the story, had lines that they said, or words that they said, that were written differently on purpose to give you an indication of how they said those things. But it was once or twice in all of their dialogue. So it wasn't the kind of thing where it's very obvious that, they're talking with a British accent, or a Brooklyn accent. I knew it was BR, I got it mixed up. Anyway, a Brooklyn accent or whatever, you're not getting every word of it written differently so that you get that full context. It's just every once in a while. And if it's far into when they've been talking, then you, as the reader, have been reading their voice or hearing their voice a particular way. And now it's written differently here, or there's a method of speaking here that is going to make you have to shift how you're reading how they speak. So now halfway through the story, they're speaking differently, even though you've been hearing them the entire time in your mind. That bothers me. It just upsets me. And especially, again, sometimes there are things that we complain about for this show that only affect us because we're doing a show.
Right.
But the way that we read these stories, at least, I read it out loud and Amy listens. I try to do voices for the characters, etc., as best I can. I'm not a great voice actor. Go watch our Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney series every Sunday over on Video Games for All, link in the description down below. And I try to do voices for different people in there, and etc. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But if I don't have a general idea of what these characters sound like, and then you throw a random word at me that's written differently because you're trying to indicate what their accent is, accents like that don't work sporadically in text form. It just doesn't work. You don't give proper context, and it's not helpful. So that bothered me a lot in this story. That, Kit, for example, had that kind of vocal thing where she said well before a lot of her sentences. Well with an exclamation point. So you imagine it's well, that kind of a southern thing. Does that mean that she's southern? No? I don't know. How the hell am I supposed to know that? But it's her way of speaking. So you don't actually get to hear Kit's voice in your head necessarily because you have to just make one up, right? And then when you get to the point in the story where maybe it's starting to indicate to you what her voice sounds like, you either skip it entirely and that portion of how the story is being written is lost on you, or you then have to change up the entire way that you read this character for that reason. It just bothers me. Again, maybe folks disagree. Obviously, you can let me know your thoughts too, but
I don't know. I think that doesn't bother me as much because I think as I'm reading about a character, I'm trying to learn more about them as we go.
Okay.
And so, to me, that's like part of the evolution of the characterization.
Okay.
But it being few and far between like that, I understand. But I also think there's a realism to it. Because, like, a person whom you're talking to, like, might not actually have an accent when you're talking to them, right? But maybe once in a while, like when they say a specific word or a specific couple of words, you hear one. You know what I mean?
Kind of.
That, like, it's not all the time, but it's like certain stuff. You know, and sometimes I do that and you make fun of me for it.
I sure do. I really do. It's great.
I just have like a certain weird way of how I say certain things.
Yeah, you weirdly, because you did not grow up there, but you slip into New Jersey every once in a while. It's very weird. Very weird.
Yeah. You know, and it's just, I think that mostly comes from like not having an upbringing where I really learned very much from my parents. So I learned a lot of what I learned from interactions with people outside of my home or like on TV and stuff like that.
Sure.
So there, I just picked up like eccentricities, I'll say, and like how I say certain things. But I think everyone has that a little bit. You know,
I've heard from so many people. I mean, not personally, but like through media that I've seen. There are so many people who I've heard who've been like, "Yeah, I went to a foreign country and watched TV and learned this language through watching TV in that language." So yeah,
that is something I could never do.
I feel like neither could I, but I've heard it so many times. Like it's just got to be a thing, right? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't think I could ever do that. 'Cause I'm terrible with foreign languages. Terrible. I mean, I took Spanish for like, God, I don't know, like an insane number of years.
Probably
and
like
I
5
can't,
to 6 maybe.
I cannot speak it for anything. Like, if my life depended on it, I would be very screwed.
Thankfully, you'd have me with you, and we'd be fine.
Hopefully.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I felt like Agnes and Kit both. I wrote here that I felt like the authors and/or the story team had a particular thought in their head of what Agnes sounded like and what Kit sounded like, and they tried to bring that through in the story. And I think I feel like I missed it, and I feel like I would have loved to have known, but it just feels like it would have catered itself more to being an auditory medium or a visual and auditory medium. And it wasn't. It's textual. So if it's written, it's a lot harder to get across a particular accent unless it's blatant. And every other word or whatever in the sentence is changed so that you get an idea of like, oh, okay, it's saying this, and so it should be this accent. But you get it from the first sentence that is written, and then you know from then on, that's how you're supposed to read that character.
Right. And the thing is that loses some realism because it's so sort of over the top.
Exaggerated, yeah.
But without that component, you either miss it or you don't really understand it.
Yeah.
You're sitting there going, okay, but what is this accent then? Like,
yeah.
What is this supposed to be?
Yeah.
So I get it.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying.
Anyway, so that was the only other point I wanted to bring up. I still loved the story, right? This is not me saying like, this didn't make sense, so I hated it. No. I still very much enjoyed, again,
it was a great story.
Yes, the description, the metaphorical language, and the story itself. It was very, like, get him to the Greek style, right? Like Hangover. Like, they're going for one thing, and like, because I was like, okay, well, she's going to make this delivery, and then she's going to get there. What's the rest of the story going to be about? Nope, that's the whole thing, right? And
every calamity along the way.
Yes, exactly. And that's totally fine. It worked out quite well. So, congrats on that. We enjoyed it. Like I said, we'll be back next week for the Streets of New Capenna Planeswalkers Guide. or the Planeswalker's Guide to Streets of New Capenna. But anyway, that, as we'll talk about it more next week, but should be something that we should read before all the other things, but it was released well after all these stories, so we are trying to do this stuff in order. And then in the coming weeks, we still have more stories to do, so stay tuned for that as well. Don't forget, as I mentioned earlier, subscribing and ringing that bell will make sure that you get that notification as soon as that video comes out so that you don't miss it, and it'll let you know when we go live every Monday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on this channel. Hey everybody, don't forget, when you join us in these videos and you go into the comments section below and you let us know what you think about accents or Maslow's hierarchy of needs or any of the myriad of things that we discussed in tonight's episode, that is a really great way for you to join us as we show off our
Hashtag Vorthos Pride.
That's right. So that is the end of the Streets of New Capenna stories in general. Again, we've still got a little bit more Streets of New Capenna to go. We've got an Elish Norn story that technically is a side story, but it's also not. So we'll have that in like a few weeks or whatever. Stay tuned. Regardless, like I said, ringing the bell. Come talk to us on stream. We'll let you know like if we know when it's coming out, when we know when it's coming out, etc. Plus, you know, just join us. It's a lot of fun. A really, really good time. And we would love to have you there.
Yes.
But for now, from us here at the Geek for All family of channels, I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.